still thinking. Coconut crashes through your window. Well, this happened to me. No. All right, we'll just fake it. All right, say when.
Go ahead.
Has this ever happened to you? You're sitting quietly at home and a coconut comes falling through your window?
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Howard Raab, and I'm going to show you how to fix a broken window. Now, I know most of you probably haven't had a coconut fall through your window, as I have. This happens to me all the time. Now, the first thing we have to do is clean up the broken glass. Very carefully now, maybe with gloves on if you have to, remove the broken glass. This glass seems to be well shattered, fell out of the frame kind of nicely. You see the putty still sticks to it. Now we'll clean up this glass and get ready to put in the new glass. Now I've cleaned up the glass. Now we have to clean up the window frame. As you can see, there's lots of old putty on the sides. All has to be cleaned up. Now, if the putty's real old and hard and chipping away anyway, you just take your putty knife. This is a little over an inch putty knife. It's the perfect size. I think it's an inch and a quarter. Inch and a half. Inch and a half, anywhere around that size will work. You just break away the stuff that's loose already. Now, as you can see, the rest of this putty is pretty hard. It's not coming off very easily. Now, what I like to use is a torch. That'll loosen up the putty. And I'll show you how that's done. Take the torch at a very low setting and very carefully run it back and forth over the putty in a small section at a time. Keep it away from the glass that's still intact because it'll break the glass in the heat. Now that heat softens up the paint and the putty. If it doesn't soften it up enough the first time, you go back over it. Just one small area at a time. Now, as you can see, the putty is real loose now. It's coming right off. Right down to the wood. Be careful not to break the wood with the putty knife by pressing too hard. If the putty's softened properly, it'll just soften up and come right out. See how easy that comes out? What we want to do is clean up this whole frame where the window is going to sit. Now, as you can see, the wood is all cleaned up. I've gotten rid of all the old putty. We're down almost to bare wood, and it is bare wood in most places. All the dirt and dust is out of it. The next step is to seal the wood. The reason we do that is to keep the new putty from getting, the oil in the putty from getting absorbed into the wood, and the putty will grow hard and start cracking. If we seal the wood, the putty will stick to the surface and not get absorbed. So to seal it, we usually use linseed oil, although you can use a regular primer to do this, and you have to let it dry. So I'm going to take the brush and the linseed oil and paint it on. Thanks to the magic of television, we'll consider it dry. And then we can go on with the next step. Now the linseed oil is dry. Now the next step is to measure the opening. Now that's very important because the accuracy of your measurements can determine how well the glass fits. So you measure the actual opening, the exact size. In this case, it's just a 1/16 over 7 inches in one direction and 9 inches in the other direction. And because this frame is old, I will consider it 7 inches exactly, because we can do away with the 1/16. So we have a 9 by 7 opening. In order for the glass to fit well and for the putty to surround the glass, we're going to take off 1/8 of an inch from each measurement. So instead of 9 by 7, we're going to make it 8 7/8 by 6 7/8. Now you can either buy the glass and cut exactly to size. The local hardware store will take care of that. Or if you have the glass around the house, I'm going to show you how to cut it. So remember, we want 8 7/8 by 6 7/8. All right, now we're going to cut the glass. Now I happen to have a piece of glass that's larger than the opening, and we're going to have to cut it to size. So I've already squared up 2 sides, so I'll have accurate square measurements. Usually when you have glass that's uncut, it's got square sides and they're parallel. Now the first thing we want to do is cut one of the dimensions. So remember I said we're taking 1/8 of an inch off of each side. So instead of being 7 inches, we're going to make it 6 7/8. Now a felt tip fine point pen works pretty good. It's not made to write on glass, but we don't care if it stays there or not, just long enough for us to make the marks and follow it. So I make a mark at 6 7/8. I make another mark at 6 7/8. Now if you'll notice, my glass cutters are in a jar with a liquid in it. That liquid is kerosene. Now you can use light machine oil, homeowner's oil, even motor oil, which is kind of heavy, but the glass cutters should always be lubricated. And I store them in the oil so that there's never any chance that the cutter will get dry. Now, the first thing you do is you take a straight edge, and I'm using a wooden ruler. And the reason I use a wooden ruler is it doesn't slip on the glass or scratch the glass. You lay it down right next to the marks, leaving enough space for the wheel and the glass cutter, which takes up a little bit of space. Now the easy way to do that is to lay the cutter wheel right on your line and then put the straight edge up to it. So I put the cutter right where I want it. I know this is hard to see. Put the straight edge right up to it, the same distance from your bottom mark. Now this might take a little practice. What you want is constant pressure. You don't want the pressure at the beginning to be heavier at the end or vice versa. You want the same pressure all the way across, and you should be able to hear the glass cutter go across the glass. However, you don't want to press too hard. If you press too hard, you'll hear a heavy sound and you'll see little glass pieces flying off, and then you know you're pressing too hard. So I'll do this first on the side just to give you an idea of what it sounds like. Now you have a cut. You take the glass, hold it just like this, your fingers on the edge, your thumb on top, fingers below, and just break away. It should break away with no trouble at all. Like I said, practice is the best way to do this. You get some old glass, maybe even the broken glass from your window, and make some practice cuts. Now I line up the straight edge with my 2 marks, draw the glass cutter down, and break. And there it is, a perfect break. Now don't wait when you want to break the glass. That's a big mistake a lot of people make, because glass, believe it or not, will heal itself. And the scratch you made in it will start to heal, and the glass might not break where you marked it. Now for the next measurement, which was 8 7/8. Make 1 mark. Second mark. And the cut. Pretty easy. Now we have the piece of glass that's the right size for the window. Now as you can see, the glass fits comfortably in there. There's a little bit of space on the sides, and that's going to give some room for the putty to surround the glass and bed it. Now the next step, put the glass aside for now, and we're going to put in the bedding. Now if your putty's been sitting around for a while, it might be hard stiff, hard to work with. That's when you take it, hold it in your hand, close your fingers around it, and wait till it gets soft. The heat from your own hand will soften it. You keep working with it, it'll soften up. This is already quite soft and workable. You take a small bit of it. It's actually a little too soft. Take a small bit of it and start putting it into the bottom of the opening that the glass is going to sit in. You don't need much here, just kind of fill up that corner. Now we can see what it looks like here. Doesn't matter if you're a little sloppy with it, it's all going to get cleaned up at the end anyway. Just take your finger and work it into that corner. And the better you work it in, the better the seal is going to be. You'll notice that some places the putty doesn't stick too well. It will stick eventually. The linseed oil, if it was really dry, would have helped that quite a bit by giving you a surface that's not dusty and dirty the way this is. All right, now as you can see, I've got the putty well placed in the entire opening of the window frame. Now what I didn't mention earlier was when you are cleaning out the old putty, make sure to get the old glazing points out as well. Sometimes they're in pretty deep and you need a pair of pliers to pull them out. Sometimes they fall out by themselves. This window, because it was so small, didn't have any glazing points in it. I still suggest using them, but whoever built this window doesn't. Now, some of you might be wondering why I put the putty in first. Now, that's something that I noticed a lot of the people who do glazing around here don't do. It's called bedding the glass, and it serves a number of functions. Mainly, it evens up the whole edge so that the glass is resting on a bed of putty. They call this bedding the glass. And it softens it and gives it a surface that evens out and won't break the glass accidentally. It also holds the glass better, and it seals it against the weather a lot better than just one layer of putty. So the putty is in there. I'm going to take the glass and carefully lay it in so that there's the same space on all sides, a little bit of space, and press it down. Now, if you can see, the putty is getting squeezed out underneath. That's good. That's what you want. Run your finger around the edge, not too hard because you don't want to break the glass, but gentle, careful pressure all the way around. You can see the putty is squeezing out underneath it. It's exactly what we want. Now, if there's a spot or two where the putty doesn't squeeze out, we can put putty in it later underneath. That's not a problem. Okay, now the glass is set. We're going to put in the glazing points. Now, these glazing points are the ones that are commercially available. They're very easy to use. They are what actually mechanically holds the glass in. The putty doesn't hold the glass in. It just seals it. Take the point. You lay it down right near where it's going to go in. You take the putty knife. You lay it on the glazing point so that the point is facing towards the woodwork where you want it to go in, and the putty knife is against these two little raised portions. And pressing it against the glass so that it's pushing down on the glass a little bit, you just push it into the wood. And generally it should go right in with a little bit of pressure. All the way until those two upright parts are touching the wood itself. I'll take another one on the other side. Now this is a very small window. I'm only going to use 4 points. What you generally do in larger windows is space them out so you have 8, 10, or 12 inches between the points. And keep them evenly spaced. Again, I push down on it as I'm pushing in, force it right in there into the wood. It's a soft wood frame. Goes in very easily. Now I'm going to put one more on the top and one more on the bottom.
Okay.
All right, now I have the glazing points are in place. The next step is the final puttying, the final glazing. Now, you notice I'm using glazing compound. It's not really window putty. The old window putty was made with lead and they don't make that anymore, lead and linseed oil. This glazing compound is more modern. It won't harden and won't chip and crack. It'll stay soft, reasonably soft. Now, what you do is you take a glob of the putty. Now, this is a little bigger than most people would feel comfortable handling, so I'm going to just break it in half, put half aside, roll it into a workable ball, and then spread it out. Now, what you want is sort of a pencil thickness. See how it's forming it into a pencil thickness rod of putty. And you lay that down on the edge, and with your thumb, just work it right in. To make sure you have an even amount. It's more than what you need. And if you find a spot that's thin, just go back over it. See, right here it got thin. I'm going to take some more and put it right in there. You go all the way around the window doing that. Okay, now as you can see, I have the putty is all the way around. It looks pretty sloppy. It's got a bunch of thumb marks on it. Now, I've seen some windows where people stopped at this point. They figured it was glazed, but it's not how we consider a glazed window. Now, we take the putty knife, same putty knife. It's a very handy tool. Lay it down in the corner at an angle, as if it was a mitered corner. Lay it right down, bend it in there. You have to put pressure on it. And just bring it right across the putty, pressing down. The blade is resting on the glass and on the wood frame. You just draw it right along, taking off the excess putty. Now I'm going to do it one more time. You take the putty knife, you lay it right in the corner. Draw it right across, pressing down on the glass and the wood frame. Now, as you can see, this leaves a ridge of putty on the glass. Take the knife, pull it away a little bit, and if you're real careful, you should be able to roll it up and take it right out of the way. And you're left with a perfectly smooth, clean, finished surface. And if you've been careful enough, that should be the end of it. You shouldn't have to go back and do it again. You can also take your knife and draw it away. If this is pretty sticky. If it's a little warm in here. If it was a little cooler, the putty would come off better. But you see, I can just take the knife, slip it in there, and just pull the excess putty away, leaving that nice, clean edge. Now, if your edge isn't so clean, very gently take your finger and just run it across, and that'll take a lot of the unevenness out of it. But don't press hard. You can leave fingerprints in there very easily. Now, as you can see, the putty is all neat, straight. The surfaces are nice and smooth. Now, we'll turn the window over. And by the way, you don't have to take the window out to actually do this. You can do it while it's right in place. So I took it out for convenience. Now, the putty that was squeezed out, as you can see, you just take your knife, run it right along the woodwork and the glass. That'll take all that out. If you see any gaps, spaces, just take a little bit of the putty and force it in. Take the knife, smooth it right out. Now, this is just to take off the excess putty. You don't have to make a smooth edge the way you did on the other side. So there you have it. The finished window is now glazed and ready, sealed to the weather. Now, if you let this glazing compound dry for a week or two, you'll be able to paint right over it. It doesn't have to dry hard, just the surface has to dry. So the next time a coconut comes flying into your window or any object that breaks your window, you'll be able to handle it. I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you learned something today.